There we go. So we spent over 200 billion in venture capital, and we're not solving the problems that we have in any meaningful way or at scale in agri-food. So CASA, which is this new organization that Drew and I are launching along with our colleague Martha and Michael Rose here, is looking to flip this model by really squeezing two lemons harder. One is the collective impact model, and the other one is open source. And this is the idea where we want to get industry to pull appropriate solutions through to meet their needs and leverage open software and systems to address some of the unique aspects of agri-food that we will talk about. You know, the fact that this is a low margin business. We have a lot of variability in the way that farms work. We have a slow adoption model when you may be looking at one crop per year, and it's high risk. There's a reason that we use the term, don't bet the farm, right? So, just a couple of lighthouse projects we're working on at CASA. Drew's going to talk about the bottom three. I'll talk very quickly about the top two. One is called Scaling California's Regenerative Almond Practices. We have 1.3 million acres of almond orchards here in California. We have about 30% of the owners and operators of those acres working to scale up regenerative practices here. And the other one is called Spade, a sharing platform for ag data and equipment. And we're looking at things like scaling up regenerative practices. How can we decrease the cost of operation? And by doing things like creating equipment sharing co-ops and so forth. So, at any rate, that said, I'm going to now make an attempt to hand this over to Priscilla and get her content.
Oh, cool. There we are. So, thank you, Rob. And let me jump in here. And what I want to do is just provide first a high-level overview of what F3 Innovate is. I think that would be helpful. We are a new nonprofit in the Central Valley. We were started, I would say, for all intents and purposes last year when I joined as CEO in August. We have an incredible board. So we came out of a big EDA grant, the Central Valley, which is the largest recipient of this Build Back Better Regional Challenge. And that created the F3 Initiative. And out of the F3 Initiative, F3 Innovate was born. And on our board, we have folks including the head of UCSC, so Gabe's boss, and we have the Chancellor of UC Merced, President of Fresno State, CDFA is on our board, GoBiz, and then community leaders, different NGOs, big farmers, small farmers in our region. And so everyone came together and said, hey, we need to fix how innovation in ag tech is being tackled currently today. And so when I came on board, it was like, how do we identify what are the missing gaps in the system in the region? And when we look at ag, how can we tackle this differently? And so I've approached this and said, you know, for us, it's about building that ecosystem, that open development ecosystem to really drive agri-food tech innovation. And I've done that by creating what we're calling 3 different pillars of impact. The first pillar is talent development, moving to commercialization work, and then our Catalyst Fund, which is the bottom one, which you can't see the text there, but that's all right.
Behind you.
Okay, cool. So why don't we jump to the next slide, and I'll go into those. The idea is that all 3 of these pillars feed and reinforce each other. One can't really exist without the other. So for the first one, our talent development, and we're really focused on the kindergarten through graduate level. We want to inspire the next generation of talent to go into ag tech and any value area of the agri-food chain. And so if you think about it, there's a few ways I like to approach it. I like to say the farm of the future is like a tech company. And you think about all the technology that we're just starting to integrate and will continue to integrate. And having the talent that can understand the integration of those technologies and the data that's coming from all those technologies and the use of robots and drones and the like, right? You're going to need a different skill set to do all of that. Farming will change. And so for us, it's thinking about the youth programs of elementary school. How do we get them interested in agriculture again? How do we show them that, like, hey, this is actually really cool. There's so much neat things happening, all the way through college. So, for example, this summer we're launching an undergraduate internship program where, 6 weeks, just as a pilot for us, because we're just getting started, but really give them hands-on experiences in different aspects of ag tech and really start building that talent pool. And so the idea is, as new solutions get developed, come to market, new startups get created, growers are looking for those folks to come in and run their operations. We're helping provide a talent pool to do that. The next pillar is our commercialization engine, and that's where we're trying to really drive the commercialization of solutions that are grower-driven. So we know there's always this big gap when it comes to what's being done in the lab versus what the growers actually need, the problems they're trying to solve for today. And so our goal is to kind of be that bridge and bring those two groups together, and industry, bring them to the table. So one side of it, I like to look at it and think about it almost like as a research accelerator. What can we do in terms of services to help drive that innovation that has the potential to make an impact out of the lab and into the market? And the other side of it is really working with the growers and understanding what they care about, what are the problems they're trying to solve, and how can we find solutions for those, whether they exist in the world, and bring it here to California, or if they don't, then how do we solution and build it, and work with and co-develop that with the academia and industry sectors. And then the last piece of it, last pillar here, is what we're calling the Catalyst Fund, so still in development. But to Rob's point, I think when you look at ag tech, the VC model hasn't worked. And so how can we approach funding for ag tech differently? How can we provide a different funding vehicle that one could argue doesn't exist today, that builds in the flexibility of what is needed for agriculture, thinking around the seasonality of revenue generation, as well as ways to de-risk that investment. So working with the growers directly and trying to find opportunities and build those contracts and the companies that are going to service those contracts, and then for us to provide the working capital to enable that to happen. So still in the works, still in development, but hope in the next couple months we can launch something that we can share with the world really how that's going to work. But I like to say we're very much tackling this as a systems builder, trying to identify what are those gaps in the market today when it comes to helping catalyze innovation in ag tech, and really trying to build the infrastructure that will enable that to happen.
Excellent, thank you. Colleen, you're going to bring up your slides. Go ahead, though.
All right, thank you. So again, my name is Colleen Josephson, and I do a lot of work on open sensing research, open source sensing research in the context of agriculture. So the slide behind you shows, this is a shot from a video that my students took of a sensor payload, that's their UAV flying around the farm, collecting images for a machine learning training data set. So just a link to the group website here. Almost all of the work that we do is open source. So kind of that confluence of three things is why I'm here today: research and open source sensing for ag, and it happens to be open source. So I've chosen to focus on, I think, one project in particular that exemplifies that. So could you go to the next slide, Joe? So why open source in ag? Kind of the working theory that we have is that open source can short circuit the vicious cycle that you've seen where new technologies, getting them adopted on the farm has been really hard. So how many people, I'll pull up a statistic for this. So how many people were aware that 70% of the world's fresh water went to irrigating crops? Okay. Now, how many people were aware that using sensors to inform irrigation, according to decades of studies, you can save anywhere between 20 and 50% of that water application and still maintain, or even in some cases, improve your crop yields? So Any guesses what the sensor adoption rate in the United States is for farms? 5%. 2%. So it's a little better than that. It's 12%, which over the past 5 years, so the USDA does a survey every so often. So the most recent data is 12%, and it has been inching up at the rate of the last survey 5 years before that was 10%. So sensing is vastly under-adopted in U.S. farms, globally, but in particular U.S. farms, considering that we're a fairly wealthy nation. And there's a lot of reasons behind why that is the case, but we have a hypothesis that one of those reasons is this vicious cycle that we've seen, where you, in kind of the traditional venture model, you have a new company or a company starting like a new business unit, and they have a promising solution. So it's a disruptive new technology, and they make this, awesome, affordable sensing system, and maybe they get some farmers to try it out, and people are pretty happy with it, and then they slowly learn that ag is a really hard business. The margins are very thin, and a lot of people, especially coming from kind of a tech background, just are not ready for that. So the success rate of these companies is very low. So, we've got the adoption, and then we have the divestments. So an existing company decides to no longer invest in the business unit, or the startup fails. And so what happens to these farmers who went and invested in this new technology is they are left with a useless device. It is bricked most of the time. When there's a company that has made technology, they don't do anything to kind of release this intellectual property afterwards. So now this poor farmer has invested their hard-won money into this technology that they can no longer use. So we think that open source has the potential to disrupt that cycle. Next slide, please. So some of what we're working on is an open source data logger for agricultural sensing. And it's fully open source all the way from the hardware design to the firmware. And I think what differentiates us from other projects that have happened in this area is we've also open sourced the data ingestion and visualization pipeline. So kind of an end-to-end system where it goes from the sensor to the data logger to something that you can actually browse on a phone or on a computer. And so the low-cost hardware collects data from any type of sensor that you want and transmits the measurements wirelessly. And then we have it ending up in a cloud process node, and you have your easy-to-use web interface. And we have a number of preliminary use cases. We're using it to support soil science research. We're validating some of the work in my own lab, so new sensors and sensor systems. We're using it to build out a smart irrigation system. And why does this disrupt the vicious cycle? Well, because it's open source. If we make it, there's less of a chance that the farmer, if they adopt it, will be left with something that's completely useless. We imagine that this could end up something like the Arduino ecosystem, where that that is open. So can we make open source hardware that can be produced by multiple, competing hardware manufacturers, have an open source community and development environment, and really start to build out an open source ag sensing ecosystem. So that's kind of our vision here. And there's a lot of other work that my lab does. A lot of it's supported by this platform. But I thought that one was the most relevant one for this here today. So I'll just, with the remaining 30 seconds, move to the last slide. All right, I can see. Perfect. So I mentioned that I'm involved with the UC Santa Cruz Agtech Alliance. So this is a relatively new initiative. It was launched earlier this year. So the mission of our Agtech Alliance is to transform agriculture through innovation, education, research, and empowerment. So we're interdisciplinary. We're a community of researchers, extensionists, engineers, activists, farmers and students, and others who we're aiming to build ethical and socially responsible agricultural technologies for a sustainable future. So looking at things like not just putting robots on farms, but how can robots and humans coexist on farms in a way that is dignified for the farm workers? How can we create agricultural technology that's affordable and accessible to small growers, not just larger growers or those growing specialized crops? So we're new, so I want to make people aware of it, and you can check out some of our activities on our website. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Colleen. Gabe, you want to bring your slides up here?
Yeah, so you guys give me a great segue, and I feel like I'm sort of bridging between these worlds a little bit. We'll see if that holds out. But that picture is, if you haven't seen that in action before, it's called the Gus sprayer. That's down in the Fresno area. That is perhaps one of the more successful applications today in California using sensing. That's an automated, autonomous sprayer is what it is. And it works pretty well, actually. And it's in commercial deployment in the field of California. Wasn't open source, but and John Deere owns at least part of it now. But the idea here is, if we do this right, California Agtech, not just California Ag, but California Agtech will feed the world. And that is the opportunity that's before us here. If we can get this right and harness what Silicon Valley does, and harness what we do in California agriculture, and harness what our amazing educational and research systems can do together, and if we work together in a system of open innovation, we will be able to do that. But we must make a conscious decision to do that. Next slide. Oh, okay. Okay, good. Again, UCNR has been in place for over 110 years. And we were created in the very early days of California agriculture. And someone well described us as the original tech transfer to the people of California. And that is very true. And we have academics in every county working every day with the farmers, with the food producers, with the ranchers, bringing the science and technology to the university, and applying it in super, super practical ways, okay? Part of my job is to think about how do we actually usher this organization into the digital age. We have a lot of plant scientists. We have a lot of people in the traditional food sciences, ag sciences, environmental sciences. Only a few computer scientists and engineers. So I'm really excited for Colleen and her background, having an ag experimentation appointment. That starts to bring the smart, engineers and computer scientists into this world and help build solutions forward. And so that's in part what I do. But I also think about not only the great things we can build at the university, but how can we partner with the amazing startup companies, open source consortia, and even corporates, both here in California, around the US, around the world, to bring these solutions forward faster. Because you guys highlighted the problems. California agriculture's future existence is not a foregone conclusion, by the way. And if we don't bring solutions that address labor challenges, climate challenges, regulatory challenges, we will be importing our food from Mexico and South America, and we'll eat fresh food that's not grown here in the US increasingly if we don't solve some of these problems. Next slide. So when we got started, we created a network, and ANR is a network. And we believe that innovation is in part led by the network. And so we are now building and scaling up and doubling down on this concept with what we're now calling the California or CA Agtech network. That is really led by the food producing regions of California. Sorry, Bay Area, you're not it. But we want you involved. But we want our food producing regions like the Fresno, Merced region, and Priscilla's a key node through F3 Innovate of that network. We need the full Central Valley, the Central Coast region, the North State region. Even in the far south of Southern California, there's this place called Imperial Valley where, guess what? You get your lettuce from in the wintertime. So we need all these places to work together, and we want to build the innovation economies around these places because that's where the expertise around food production is. Why not create ag tech hubs that are centered around our food producing hubs as well? So that's where we started. That's now scaling up and growing and likely to go really big here in the next year. Next slide. And so a thing that we have been doing that I think fills the gap between the things that others are not doing yet is to really leverage our position as the bridge between academia, industry, government, to really demonstrate technologies that are out there. And so we have a platform that works with existing things that are beyond the scope of an open source board, that are in a company format, because companies have to be the ones to sell technology to growers. Growers buy stuff, and companies sell stuff. So these companies have solutions that have put together things, and we're trying to demonstrate them and evaluate them and see if they're working and have growers kick the tires of them. We work to give feedback to these companies to improve their product along precision agriculture, smart machinery, biological inputs to transition technology. A lot of them have sensing, almost all of them have sensing applications built into them. And so this is a thing we're doing today. We have one in Ventura. We're going to do one in the Central Valley, one in Youtsey, Merced, around soil health. So we'd love to demonstrate some of these products as well. So that's a really important piece right now because the growers need to see these technologies. They need to put their hands on them. They need to kick the tires of them. And the people inventing them, like I saw the Blue River is across the street, they're only going to get smarter about ag if they come out of Silicon Valley and go to the field and work with the growers to do that. And Blue River actually got their start by coming out of Silicon Valley and going down to the Central Valley and building their solution, as an example. Next slide. But we also bridge back into the university world because we want to help build these collaborations that build solutions forward. One such, which was a $20 million grant funded through the NSF and the USDA, is called AI and Food System Institute, led by Davis, but Berkeley, Cornell, Illinois, USDA, A&R are all involved. It spans the food system, so it goes all the way from crop breeding through farming, through food processing, and even how does food impact our health, and building AI applications for that. Our job was to think about how to engage communities. But that has really built it was very interesting watching a plant scientist and a computer scientist try to talk, realizing, actually, these people don't understand each other at all. So that is more of what's needed, is those kinds of collaborations that actually then flow back into the institutional technology people at the libraries and the research computing centers and IT, to grapple with how do we scale up IT, AI in food systems for applications that have real world impact from our research, such as new crop varietals or new smart machines or new compounds to replace harmful pesticides, but that actually all the way back down into the campus's IT apparatus to figure out how do we scale AI up in a way that's useful and meaningful as well. And that's what APHIS is in part doing. Next slide. What APHIS led for us was a really cool outcome to engage kids, and these kids are college kids, so undergraduate students. And so we created a format to really create a practical way to engage with AI on the farm, and that is through a small farm robot or a drone. And this small farm robotics challenge enabled growers, farmers to identify the problems that they're having and teams to form up to provide real-world solutions to those with a small form factor robot or a drone. And now we have 40 teams competing this year. Say UC Santa Cruz is one of those, has a team. We've got teams through Innovate in the Central Valley as well. We actually have teams all over the world now. This thing has really grown. And like Priscilla said, it's so important to engage our young people even before college, and well before that, like elementary school, to understand and value where their food comes from. Technology can be a way they can do that. So that's an outcome that came from the network through APHIS, through this, And you can see how the evolution of these things and the interconnectedness comes together in really growing this ecosystem, which we all need to do together in an open innovation format to bring these solutions faster to solve these challenges.
Gabe, two things on the farm robotics challenge. So one, you can see up here, there's a standard platform that all the teams are building upon, this FarmNG platform, which is open, using open computer vision, for instance. So that's one. What was the second point I was going to make? Oh, I wanted to make a point about irrigation and the fact that you talked about Blue River. Yeah. Blue River was successfully acquired by John Deere. So I appreciate that we are in the shadow of the big John Deere proprietary OS green shadow right here.
The Microsoft of Agtech.
Exactly. And it's the same thing with irrigation, by the way. When you look at the different color paint of the irrigation world, like a NetFM versus the others, right? They don't interoperate. So if you're on a John Deere system, you have a hard time getting support or service from an international harvester, right? And if you're the same thing, if you're on NetFM, you can't get support from somebody else. So these are still siloed services. We got to break these things down. And this is why we got to get more of the open source and the interoperability. With that said, Drew, why don't you talk about, we'll get you set up here.
Well, I mean, that's exactly right. What a great panel. And I mean, the struggle is real, right? Connecting and, technology is so amazing with what we can do today, but tech isn't going to move food, right? Collaboration does. And I think that's the same about, how we address some of the challenges with engaging young people and engaging new minds in innovation and connecting with those that are growing our food and how do they adopt these technologies. It's not just about tech, it's about connecting real world problems and solutions in a way that's collaborative and interoperable so that you're not stuck with a bricked tech or disconnected employees that can't leverage insights or value from that technology. That was really what we had been experiencing for years at the International Fresh Produce Association. I've had the privilege of volunteering with that association for about a decade and a half. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I just exited my last company, fourth company, year before last. We started a small software company on farm working with growers, trying to help them connect with data collection and management systems, not only to provide better agronomic results and higher yields and create more nutritious food for the world, but also to communicate those practices through the supply chain, because we know how we care for our environment, the nutritional profile of our food, and the social aspects of our business are important for consumers and for each and one of us. So how do we take that data and information from the supply chain and move it through the supply chain in a way that adds value when things are disconnected and when they don't interoperate? There's proprietary systems and people aren't even speaking the same languages. These are major challenges. And so we looked at a really interesting case that happened right around 2020. I don't know if you remember, but things got a little weird and the supply chain got all messed up. And we were looking at some amazing successes that occurred during that time. You may have noticed that one thing that was always on the shelf was fresh produce. We did a damn good job. And it was healthy and it was there. But there was also a number of issues that we continued to run up against around data interoperability or the lack thereof, lack of trust and data privacy, and a number of issues around just interconnectedness of the global supply chain that created a number of issues. And so we paid attention, and when we came out the other end of that little period of time, we thought, well, what if we just fundamentally shifted our approach to innovation? And we didn't focus on tech. We looked at collaboration, connecting the actors through the supply chain, and then we leveraged open source as a means to really rise the tide for all of industry. And so that's what we've done with the Supply Chain of the Future initiative. Rob had mentioned there were the 6 projects at the Collaboratory for Open Software and Systems for Ag and Food, for COSF. One of those is the Supply Chain of the Future initiative, and he wanted me to also speak about a couple others, the Smart Data Escrow, or SADE, called the Smart Asynchronous Data in Escrow, because we like fun names, and the TUID, which is not a fun name, but it's a Transportation Unit Identifier. So there's like technical tools in the toolbox at COSF, but the Supply Chain of the Future initiative was really about collaborating across the supply chain to drive value, and that value would then drive adoption of those technologies. I think I have a couple more slides, but I don't really remember. Oh yeah, cool, that one. So what we did is we said, well, everyone was tired of talking about what we're going to talk about when we next meet to talk at the next meeting. So let's not do that, right? Let's actually get people in a room and out of the chair and up against the wall with sticky notes, and let's do a collabathon. So we brought 100 supply chain actors from across food and retail, so growers and packers, shippers, processors, distributors. We had standards bodies and regulatory entities, as well as retail and food service folks there. And we had thousands of sticky notes that painted a map of the entire supply chain, all of the challenges and opportunities. And it was a wonderful experience where people were able to really just openly communicate in a non-competitive, pre-commercial state where they were sharing these challenges and opportunities, not from like I'm griping about the problems today, but if I were to imagine the solutions tomorrow, what would those look like? And let's start with that and work backwards. So it was really cool. From there, we then did similar collabathons in Asia, Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Australia. So those were hybrid or virtual events. And it was cool because while there was geographical and cultural nuances, the main challenges were very similar. And the desire to work together was shared by all. So it was really cool to see that come to life. Next slide, please. So, yeah, I was right. So what came out, it might be a little slow on our small print, we'll see if you can read it, but the first two initiatives that we saw here on your left-hand side was shelf life prediction and dynamic incentives. So if we can imagine a world where our food was routed in a way that brought you the healthiest, most freshest food to the shelf so that when you bought those blueberries, they weren't fuzzy 3 days after you bought them. Right? That's good for the grower. They're not getting the discounts on the perished product. That's good for the retailer. They have happy customers with better margins. It's good for you because you're not wasting food and you're having a better experience. Right? It's also great for our environment. Right? So I mean that's beyond a triple net win for everybody. So when we think about how do we get industry to embrace open source and collaboratively built tech, well, we got to give them a reason, and money's usually a pretty good reason, right? And we also have societal things that we're concerned about. So these check the box. In that same vein, dynamic incentives speaks to the fact that there are more people involved in the purchase transaction than the buyer and the seller. We have tech companies that build really cool software, insights and algorithms, sensor companies, logistics providers. We have all of us, and those are the companies that we work with or aspire to work with, that add value in the supply chain. So we wanted to make sure that we recognized that those people that add value in the supply chain, they should have an entitlement to a commensurate return of value. They should get paid for that performance. I think it's a novel concept. The one that I'm most excited about is when you flip that conversation and you say, if you're not adding value in the supply chain, you don't have a place in the future. There's a lot of extractive actors in what we call the messy middle of the supply chain, and the future of the supply chain eradicates them from the process. So that's the big idea. We're getting the buyers and the sellers, the retailers. We have some of the largest brands in food today excited and participating, and because they see the value. But they don't know how to get there. And there's some real challenges in the way, and we need some tech enablers to help move us there. And so the tech enablers are smart data escrow and harmonized standards. So imagine a world where you can share your data with anyone without sharing it with everyone, right? A stack that lets you put in a zero compute environment behind your own firewall, the data, and then you just send the algorithm to the data, send the data to the algorithm. Right, so there's an open source code stack. It's called Agape. It was published in the IEEE Journal of Secure and Dependable Compute, and has some reference code implementations. It's still very new. It has some work to be done, but it enables that very thing. And so industry is like, well, this is fantastic. This is exactly the problem that we have with being able to share our information for some reasons, but not have it used for other purposes. And you think, well, gosh, why wouldn't you share information about food safety? I mean, come on, everybody likes to eat, nobody likes to get sick, right? So why wouldn't we share all that food safety information? Well, because contained within this food safety information is a whole manifest of your labor, your agronomic practices, your horticultural practices, the chemistries that you use, and all kinds of information about your volume that you don't want to share with the buyer because then that puts downward price pressure on your product. Oh. Now there's a problem. So we want to optimize the supply chain, but we also need to put food on our own plate, right? And so Smart Data Escrow enables that. And we've had applications across other supply chains in pharmaceuticals, aerospace and defense. We're also working collaboratively with USTR, Customs and Border Protection, on zero-knowledge applications for all cross-border transactions, which, as you can imagine, is a pretty interesting topic these days. So that's a cool way to bring open source technology to empower some really meaningful things for industry to drive adoption and engagement. And of course, nothing works without harmonized standards. It's really helpful if we're all speaking the same language. We call things the same stuff. So we brought together GS1. Anyone heard of GS1? Anybody know what a barcode is? They know the barcode. Yeah, right. So there's the barcode people. ISO, we know those, your good friends. UNC FACT, our friends across the pond. And then ASTM, a 150-year-old standards organization on standards on things like oil and roadways and sidewalks. Also digital information supply chain. So we put them all in the same room, and we're saying, guys, you're not getting out of this room until you work together. So, and they're working together. They're on the committees and workforces. We've got a team. We've got about 500 some odd people, right around 300 companies. Our list goes deep, 45,000 members strong, but we haven't reached them all yet. But we've got some real strong people engaged. We've got about 100 people in the working groups right now that are starting to tackle these things when we start to launch the project. I think I probably need to keep moving, Rob. I get excited. I'm going to use it all the time because we are moving. We are cranking. We did the collaborathons this winter. We're now doing the technical working groups now. I'm going to throw up a slide here in just a minute to encourage you guys to get some more information. We have pilots and collaborative demos coming out this summer, and those are going to include real buyers, real sellers, and real tech companies, and you're all invited to participate. There's some opportunities for students and scholarships to participate in this. We'd love to have people engaged because we're going to show this off in Anaheim, down at our global show with 35,000 of our closest friends, where we'll be at the State of the Industry keynote, showcasing not just what we did, but providing a roadmap of where we're going beyond implementation, how industry is going to continue to adopt and propel these technologies into the future. So it's not just a flash in the pan, it's a movement that's just getting started. Next slide, please. So you can go ahead and find out more, scan that QR code. I want to see everybody's phone in the air. You can find a cool video. You can get our white paper. We've got a solid white paper to go read through. You can also join the working groups. Working groups are open and free to anyone with a legitimate reason to participate in a conductive and professional way. We have two different working groups. One is specifically about shelf life and dynamic incentives, so you want to get into that interesting business mix. And the others are the guys that want to geek out with us on smart data escrow, harmonized standards. You want to actually make stuff work. So I encourage you to check that out. The next slide will also have a QR code, so you won't miss it. We have use cases and collaborative demonstrations. So if you have tech, or you know people working on tech, and you have projects and you want to showcase those, we have like full global pilots that include end-to-end, and we also have a cool innovation hub where you can post use cases and white papers on science-based research and products. So appreciate you listening to me today. Rob, sorry if I went over time. If there's one more slide, I think it's about getting to our white paper, which you can download there. And yeah, come talk if you want to know more. Thanks for the time.
Excellent. Priscilla, you're going to get jumping at the bit.
Yeah, no, I wanted to follow up on something, Drew, that you said. So I spent part of my career working in cybersecurity, and when I was studying at MIT, getting my master's, I took the untraditional route of studying and doing research on information sharing and security. And looking at the challenges and the importance of that to tackle solutions that really work, it was information sharing. And so one of the projects that we're starting with F3 Innovate, and we've done it in collaboration with UC A&R, UC Merced, Fresno State, and UC San Diego Supercomputer Center, is building this AI for Ag supercomputing center in the Central Valley, where we're piloting it there. The goal is that it will be a statewide resource. But it's really tackling that big question that we're all thinking about in some degree about this AI and how does that impact what's happening in ag. And it all comes down to data. And the fact that in ag, data is so siloed and it's hard to get. And how do we really bring value of AI in ag? And so for us, one of the things that we're really trying to do is like, let's just start building data, open source the data, so that we can then provide it to researchers, we can provide it to students, we can provide it to startups, and industry to come to the table and help figure out the solutions that are actually going to really drive impact and seeing the adoption of these technologies on farms because we know that it's not necessarily a lack of innovation that's the bottleneck. It really is the trust, it's the accessibility, and it's really the translation, right? And so this is just one initiative that we're trying to drive down in our region and hope to expand it. So I think that's something that's a really critical piece of just that infrastructure that we need to really build that open source way of driving innovation.
That's really well said. And we can only move at the speed of trust, right? I'd love to know more about your project that you're working on. In the supply chain of the future, we had a similar challenge. We wanted to share like the license plate of the product, right, the transportation unit identifier for everyone to be able to use, but the data behind it needed to be conditionally accessed. So it'll be interesting to see how you're working through that. That's part of what we're doing with Sadie.
And this is exactly what I wanted you panelists. We didn't do a prep call intentionally because I wanted them to hear from each other and then identify ways that they could collaborate. And so already in the lobby, Colleen and Gabe were talking about underground soil sensors and how they could work together on that. What else emerged for you when you were listening to each other about potential ways to collaborate?
I mean, I'll just first add agreement to what you guys have said about the need for information sharing and building trust. Growers in California, I'm guessing the world over, see what they do and the way they do it as a secret sauce of how they could get an edge in the market. And so in many cases, they are geared in their own minds, I'd say a lot of cases, not to collaborate to get a competitive edge over the next guy. And so that creates a disincentive for information and data sharing and collaboration a lot of times, which is actually required to aggregate enough data to make an AI model actually work. So I think these kinds of solutions where we can build trust that you can share just enough data but not farm, literally, and also that the solutions we can demonstrate that will come out of these collaborations will benefit everybody to the point where even if it will benefit your neighbor, that's a benefit to you because a healthy ecosystems, all ships rise and float with the tide. That is going to be true of the California ag ecosystem. Interestingly, we need these solutions also within A&R. We have a guy who's an irrigation consultant in Salinas named Michael Kahn who took UC irrigation models, which are open source, published information, by the way, and all the growers use them in various ways, and built an information system out of them, which gives a specific prescription for irrigation and fertilizer, nitrogen, which is a big issue in California. But that is only limitedly informed by sensor data. It takes a lot of hand-holding and trust building. It doesn't have AI built in, so it's not predictive. It's model-based, not data-driven. And so we've got these examples in place, but we need to do more to build the technology so it integrates with other things. It integrates with the systems that growers are using, because guess what? They're all using their own either proprietary, purpose-built, or off-the-shelf systems that they try to get to talk with each other, but not with other applications from the outside. So that's a big challenge that we're trying to solve, and then really demonstrating the need for these kinds of solutions that we're talking about.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight some common themes I heard across, I think, every one of us. So the first one being the importance of not having solutions in search of a problem. It's really important to, some of what we do in our group, we call it co-innovation, co-development, where instead of taking something and developing a solution and saying, like, here it is, please use it, we have to have the users in mind early in the process, go and get feedback and figure out, is this solving problems that they actually have? What did we not think of that is a critical issue for them? One thing that surprised me early on as a younger researcher about sensing systems in particular is a lot of farms actually, because of the wires, they need to completely uninstall the entire sensing system every year to process their fields and then reinstall it in many cases, which is incredibly labor intensive. So they have this hunger for systems that can be completely wireless if possible, because that would just make their lives so much easier. And then I think another thing I heard multiple people talking about was we talk about open source. Open standards are, it's not necessarily open source, but it's like a close sibling. And this idea of having different technologies become more interoperable and kind of maximizing grower choice is a really important thing. That was, I guess, a point I didn't really quite get to with some of the goals of our open source sensing stack. But, there are many, many vendors out there who are making different technologies, and they have their siloed all-in-one solution, which reduces a lot of freedom. You don't want to be a farm that is like the John Deere farm or the blah farm or the blah farm. You want to be able to pick and choose different technologies and have the capacity to, connect so-and-so's new sensor with, this data logger that you just bought and upload it and process it and have the best, irrigation prediction algorithm telling you what to turn on where. We don't have that capacity right now, and I think that increasing openness in ag technology could go a long way for that.
Any other ideas about collaboration? Anything else emerged? No?
Well, I mean, Colleen and I talked that we need to connect after. She's got students working on data collection, which is first and foremost the foundation of what we need. So that could be a great collaboration for our supercomputing center.
That's great. And I think from Drew's perspective, he can tell you more about the data sovereignty solution that he was talking about a little bit about. I will say, for the last decade, Gabe, Drew, and I have been going to the same conferences. Every conference we talk about who owns the data, right? And agriculture in particular seems like it's still just a little bit far behind in terms of understanding that there are solutions out there where you can share data, data sovereignty solutions, right? Where you can actually determine who sees your data. Maybe you just get the answer, not necessarily the data per se, but you can have an audit trail, should that be necessary. Things like oblivious computing, they're out there, and these aren't yet, they haven't been applied to agriculture, and that's where we need help. We need to get the best and brightest, bring in solutions from outside of agriculture to ag and food, because it's a pretty important space. I think all of you have probably eaten today, right? You're probably going to do it sometime today. We need to be able to do that on an ongoing basis on a more crowded planet. So, yep, we got to, if you would jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with a question.
Because I've heard kind of two comments about the data. One is that the farmers are hesitant to give it out because it's their secret sauce. And a separate but related is who owns it and who can kind of monetize that. The first one, like in clinical data, you make it anonymous, right? So I'm just curious what, and some of this has already been mentioned, but I'm curious how you get to those standards of sharing the data and what they might look like in a little bit more detail.
Take that, Drew?
Yeah, I do. That's a great question. Farming's interesting because it happens somewhere, right? And so as soon as that data is geo-referenced, which is the most useful information in farming, you know where it happened, and you know what crop, and you know what time, and you can triangulate that with other information. You can start to understand patterns that that could maybe you don't want shared, right? So that's where some of the hesitation is. It's the specific use cases around data sharing that makes it challenging. And anonymizing it isn't always easy when it's geo-referenced, right? But then there's oftentimes, I think, just a lack of understanding that people are like, well, I don't understand the risks and I don't really understand the situation. I'm not a tech guy, I'm a farmer, so I'm just going to just put my big wall up and cross my arms and not listen. And that's really what we're seeing, and I think the opportunity for collaboration here and with all of you is like, let's actually get some specific use cases and some real data exchanges with actual schemas designed and real data flowing around a real use case, and then define the rules of that. Let's like chunk it into one bite at a time, right? And not just try to do this big broad brush industry standard, because I'm on standards committees and we're meeting for years, and it's painful, right? And we need these individual use cases. So I don't know if that answers your question as well, but it's a big problem that needs small solutions one step at a time.
Priscilla, you want to add on?
I would just agree with that and say, a lot of the growers that I've engaged with, they say, I'm not collecting data, even though they probably are. And they're like, I don't even know what data to collect. And when someone collects data for them, they can't even see the value in that data collection, and so they get rid of that person on their team. So it's very early stages and really trying to understand like what is out there and what can we start collecting, and then getting into the whole sensitivity of what actually the data is.
Yeah, and there's, go ahead, Gabe, you're going to respond.
I'll agree with you guys and say one dynamic. We're maybe talking a lot right now about sort of the business of farming and then producing a solution that growers would use to, let's say, optimize resources, ultimately make more money. But there's another dynamic of data sharing, and that's actually sort of cross-food system, right? Because ultimately, inputs go into the farm, food crops come out, it gets processed, it gets sold, it gets consumed. And I am also excited about that sort of cross-food system look, because as we start to, you mentioned, you've probably heard this term, regenerative agriculture. Well, the market actually doesn't even know what that means yet. We, true believers, think we know, but the average consumer, if they see the word regenerative on the shelf, they don't actually know what it means. So what actually is needed there is to change the way of what's needed. Why is it healthier for them? We do find that consumers choose more on health than sustainability at this moment. And so how can we demonstrate through data integration that something like a regeneratively produced food is actually healthier for you? And that evidence doesn't quite exist, and we must have integrated data streams and do the research and build the applications and produce the foods that can do that. And that will ultimately, if we can do that and connect those use cases, that's a fairly big one, but those use cases together, we could do things like create health policies that would actually use things like medical insurance to pay for regeneratively grown food. And that's actually being researched and tried in a real world way, but we need the data to enable that and the sharing across these systems. So you asked about something I'm excited about it. We're calling that food AI, and I am excited about that.
And I'm going to build on this a little bit. It's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't on the geotagging. The state of California has been collecting data on healthy soils. We believe if you have healthier soils, it will result in a healthier food product. The issue is the data that the state has been collecting has not been geocoded. And so we have all this data about soil, but we don't know where the soil is. So it's kind of useless data. There are privacy concerns with the state, obviously. I'm government and I'm here to help. Farmers don't appreciate that. We've been trying to go in and say, at least go collect the data. This is something called GeoJSON. We can start adding this to the data collection, and then we can decide whether the owner of that data wants to share that or not with the UCANR or
Whoever.
with the customer, right? Whoever. But we got to start collecting the data. So this is the challenge that we have of getting over this bogeyman of like data privacy and understanding that the solutions are out there already.
And I gotta kind of side with the farmers on this. I got 10 things to do today, and 8 of them aren't getting done. And one of those is not asking for more data.
Right.
That doesn't add me value in the moment to improve my outcomes and put food on my family's plate and family farm in the family. And so this concept of we just got to keep asking for more and more data because some data is going to be useful is not an acceptable value proposition. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to come out and start deriving some initial insights and value that we can bring back and say, look, here's the value for this data that you just collected.
would you mind collecting a little more? We think we could do something with it. But it's got to be a give and a take. We can't just be going out saying, AI is going to save the world, tech's really good, trust us, we're a tech company, we're here to help you. It's just the same kind of story. So I think there's a balance there, Rob.
Yeah. But more questions from the audience?
Yeah.
Going one second. Yes?
So I'm not part of, So I'm not part of the ag tech world, but I have a question that is maybe a little political in nature. So with tariffs making it more attractive to grow food domestically and greater deportations making it more difficult to find a labor force domestically, I'm just wondering how that's not just changing the dialogue, but the people who want to be a part of it. Do you have new people coming in with new ideas or questions?
Who wants to take that? Priscilla, you're doing workforce development.
That's a great question, right? I think we're looking at it from workforce development to tech integration, right? And how can technology help us address some of the workforce challenges? But I think that goes back to really focusing on our local communities and really trying to upskill the current talent so that they can take on these new roles as technology gets integrated, and bring in new people. So I think we're in the early stages, at least from my perspective. I think we're starting to just see the impact of what these potential tariffs will have, and I think everyone's really trying to assess how this is going to impact the ag sector and the specific local communities and the workforce that exists there. And so I think we're just trying to anticipate what might happen and how to bring, of course we want more people, right? More people to come into the sector.
Colleen?
Yeah, and to kind of add to that, I think there's room for a certain flavor of automation. Automation where it's less of large machines going and collecting everything for you, but smaller, more nimble things where people can view them as more of a coworker, and humans have oversight into the process. And how do we I think this kind of comes back to the open source theme, which is if you're building out these platforms, one thing that a lot of farms, especially kind of in Santa Cruz, which has some of the most diversified small farms in the area, they grow lots of different crops. There's a long history of building a robot to farm, harvest strawberries in particular. So there's a lot of robotic monotaskers. Can we use openness as a way to develop more of a multitasking approach to things? So you have a platform, and can somebody build on top of it using open interfaces, open APIs to, one developer out there build something that can help, go along crop rows and plant seedings. Another person, an intern at college, or maybe an intern in your program this summer, develop something that helps pluck weeds, which is a very back-breaking task that farm workers don't want to do. Maybe you have one thing that picks the strawberries, another thing that is specializing in how to harvest something else. So I think that there's a role for that kind of technology. And just from my role as being an educator at UC Santa Cruz, there is excitement from the young people looking to do this kind of work. We have people who want to be engineers. Engineering is a high-paying field, but students are increasingly looking for having a purpose behind their work. How can they use technology to help support the world, help support some, growing healthy food, doing it in a way that's better for the local ecosystem, the local climate. And even people who are deeply interested in this are coming out not aware that there are jobs in this area. I heard from a student who worked in my lab, she's like, I really want to have a career in this. And I'm looking through LinkedIn and I just can't find, that's all for being like a software engineer at Facebook. How do I actually find these jobs to do these things? So I think getting younger people kind of aware of this is very, very important, but even the people who are aware of it, how do we connect them to what already is going on?
Yeah.
I know we've belabored this, but it's a really important question, super, super important question. And if we can't, we need to figure this out, because there's two types of growers, by the way, in California. Either you love the tariffs, they're really helping you, or you hate them. And the difference is, if you're a walnut grower, you export almost 90% of your stuff around the world. Bad. If you're an avocado grower, you're fighting against dumping of avocados from Mexico. Good. So it really depends on the type of grower, but I will say that with the combination of tariffs and border policies, if those two things stick, it's going to vastly reshape crop production in California, because the growers that can make money are going to transition to other types of crops. Pistachios and olives are growing right now, as an example. Walnuts are being chipped up and tilled back into the ground. But the labor issues are not going away. And we are not going to be able to pick a strawberry with a harvester anytime soon. We can do it, but it's so slow. You can pick about, I forget the statistics, but it's hundreds of times more strawberries per acre per hour, hundreds of times more with a labor crew than you can a robot. And the most promising one, Advanced Farm, just shut down. So it's not promising. That's not going to happen.
They've had more luck with building robots to follow the human pickers so that they have a place.
Co-robots. Yeah, I think, yeah, exactly. Co-robotics are definitely there, but I think you're going to still see transition to less labor-intensive crops. You can automate processing tomatoes, olives, nuts, and those two things will absolutely reshape agriculture, and we need the workforce to do all this.
We're running out of time. I wanted to make maybe one last comment, which we didn't really get to talk to, but one of the things I think is really important about UC Santa Cruz and what they're doing down there is they're looking at inclusive innovation. And so, for instance, in Gabe's Farm Robotics Challenge, UC Santa Cruz, I believe 2 years in a row, has won the Small Farm Innovation Award. And I have a concern about the digital haves and have-nots being big farms versus little farms. And we have to make sure, and I think, Priscilla, you're doing this as well, and looking at the smaller farms and making sure that they have smaller digital solutions that are appropriate for their farms as well. Or we are going to see that divide where the big just keep getting bigger and the small go the way of the dodo. So not to end on a Debbie Downer note, but I just wanted to throw that out there because we just didn't really get to talk about that. But I can start to hear the stomachs rumbling out there. So if you would, please help me thank the panelists. And please help us keep ag for California.